Hello and welcome to our College Sports Communications webinar. This session highlights how today's SIDs can honor the profession's core traditions while adopting new tools, platforms, and strategies. My name is Cole Helman, and I am the Assistant AD for Athletic Communications at Palm Beach Atlantic University. This webinar is presented by the Young Professionals Committee, and I'm excited to serve as today's moderator. I'm joined by Brittany Iamele, Assistant Director of Athletic Communications and Creative Media at Florida Southern College, and Lynn Walsh, Director of Athletics Communications and Creative Content at College of Charleston. Thank you to those who submitted questions during the registration. If you're watching live, you can submit additional questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We've got a lot to cover, so I'll turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves and share a bit about their journey in athletic communications. Brittany, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany Iamele, like Cole mentioned, Assistant Director of Athletic Communications and Creative Media here at Florida Southern College. A little bit about me. I was a student athlete here at Florida Southern from 2017 to 2022, and I played women's lacrosse here. While I was here, I worked as a student worker in our communications office. I also worked with the Pan American Lacrosse Association, trying to promote lacrosse to the Olympic level, which it now has gotten there. And then after I graduated, I went to Eckerd. I was there the past 3 years as an assistant director of athletic communications. And I am now back at my alma mater in this new role starting this year.
Thanks, Brittany. Lynn, how about yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Lynn Walsh. I'm excited to be here today. I'm the Director of Communications and Creative Content at the College of Charleston. I apologize if you can hear the construction that has just started outside my window, so hopefully it's not coming through too much. But started here at Charleston in 2022. Prior to that, was at a Division III school for 4 years. So I've been on quite a few sides of things and interacted with a lot of people, and excited for this conversation we're going to have today.
Awesome. Thank you, then. Now that we know a little bit more about our group, let's go ahead and jump into today's discussion. As a reminder, again, for those of you who just joined, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. The first topic I feel like we should dive into is what does the SID role mean today? Understanding that the role of an SID or athletic communications has changed dramatically in a short amount of time, and understanding that shift can kind of help frame some of the other topics we're going to cover today. So the first question I'm going to throw out to our panelist is, how has the role evolved in the last 5 to 10 years? Then let's start with you.
Yeah, and that's how long I've been in the profession, is 10 years, right? So from starting out at a Division III school, right, where your resources are limited and your SIDs are really the only external people in your department, right? You already have a lot going there. Now at the Division I level, it's still a lot being thrown on. Here at Charleston, in our comms office, we're SIDs. We're also in charge of all social. That includes all graphics, all production planning with our video department, right? And those things get piled on with no staffing increases to it, right? And that creates the tricky part of, well, we've come up in one thing and I'm trained in one thing and I've done this forever, but now I'm being asked to do this other task. And I think a lot of us here on this chat and webinar, you want to hold yourself to a certain standard, and you want to produce content that puts your school and university in the best light, while maybe not being trained or excelling in those things, right? I'm not a graphic designer by any means, right? But my staff is. And one thing we talked a lot about when we were planning this call was hiring people that fill your weaknesses and having a staff that kind of fits all the puzzle pieces together, and people that understand the importance of having those different specialties come together, because it's not changing. We're being asked to do certain things, right? At the end of the day, it's a job, and we're asked to do this task as our job, right? That's not something that's unique to athletics and working in sports, is fulfilling this task that we're asked to do. So it's, how are we going to best utilize that? And what are the priorities set from you from above, right? What is your administration's priorities? Where do they want you to lean? Because at the end of the day, there's going to be some things that are going to have to take sacrifices, and it's for you to figure out institutionally and personally what those are going to be for you.
And I'll just kind of add to that a little bit, kind of being on the other side of it as a student athlete, you know, in this last 5 to 10 years at the institution that I'm at, so much has changed in our department kind of structurally as well. Like, I know Lynn was saying that sometimes you don't have people added, but when I was a student athlete here, there was a point in time where the comms department was 1 or 2 people, and there was pretty much no creative focus. I didn't have a media day until maybe my junior year. And now we're a staff of 4, and we prioritize creative content by, bringing on people such as myself to kind of fill that gap, as well as hiring and training student workers to be doing those kinds of jobs.
Yeah, and for myself personally, I think back, 10 years ago, I was learning the profession as an undergrad at Grace College, as a student worker, and just kind of thinking back then, I feel like we were just kind of starting to scratch the surface as far as like, the graphics and the creative, and everyone having at the small school level, being expected to have a live stream and a broadcast. So trying to figure out all of those things and how we can kind of make them the best that we could, with having limited staffing. My boss and mentor, he was a one-man shop, and I was just lucky to be one of the student workers. So it was cool to see how he kind of managed that, as I feel like that's when a lot of this stuff was really making it shift to, hey, we want more of the graphics, we want more of the video, we want more of the creative piece. So it was great to learn as that was kind of happening. Our next question is, how do you balance the traditional responsibilities with now that growing demand for creative content and digital storytelling? Brittany, how about you start us off this time?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned the student workers a little bit before, and so did Lynn. But I think, and in terms of staffing, it's finding people to do jobs that they're interested in or good at. We've had some student workers who are extremely interested in the creative piece, and that's kind of, pushing the needle in the new like creative content side. But we've also had other student workers and members of our staff as well who are more interested in the statistical piece, the record keeping piece. So I think the biggest thing in terms of departments in regard to that is playing to people's strengths, and also still prioritizing the, integrity of the role, with stats and record keeping as well.
Yeah, I think a good example for this too is kind of what's been going on these last 2 weekends with baseball and softball opening, and us kind of all navigating a perfect blend of, right, traditional needs to meet innovation because we're forced to, right? And that's kind of what's happening right now. And I think across the profession, in that example, we can take into other realms of giving everybody grace and understanding and helping each other out. I think one thing that's great about this profession is people's willingness to help, but it's also the opposite end of, right, criticism of maybe you're not taking that traditional side so important, or maybe this isn't the top of your priority, right? And that's where it needs to meet of the human element of things is, all right, I'm great at this, you're great at that. We both need to be important to succeed, and kind of create that, right? So I think this whole baseball, softball of how do we navigate it together and find out new things and kind of help each other across this profession is a timely example right now. And if anyone has answers, let me know.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. I know it's really challenged me to kind of identify how I want my department to look, because I would say how we've built things here at PBA looks way different than when I started as the assistant SID. We didn't really have student workers, we didn't have student creatives, we didn't focus on we didn't do any of the highlight hype, flashy type stylized content. Whereas I feel now things have shifted, and the way that a lot of our constituents, mainly our student athletes and the younger generation, consume sports has changed completely. I feel when I was growing up and the stuff that used to really speak to me, I loved the sports center-y, type highlight stuff. That's what I like, and that's what I still like today. But the younger generation that's consuming most of our content, what speaks to them more is the flashy, fancy editing, stylized, all those type videos. So trying to appease them and try to get creative with how we organize things so that we can fit that need has been good. I think we've done a solid job with that. With the recent shift from traditional sports information to the growing importance of digital media, what transferable skills or core values of the profession have remained the same? Lynn, you want to start us off with that one?
Yeah, I think it's understanding how to marry the two. I think one thing that I always try to look for when producing social content, because transparent, that's where our department is, right? That's where the priority is going to be on social and creative, because at College of Charleston in the mid-major level, that's where majority of our influence and our push is going to be coming from internally, right? So that's where we're going to focus majority of our time. But I always like to marry those stat elements and the traditional records and history and knowledge, and this hasn't happened in a game since this, and this duo when we had our big man 7-footer duo went 18 for 20 from the field, right? So I'm going to take those stats, and that's what I'm going to push on the social end, because at the end of the day, that's kind of where my roots are in those stats and those numbers and keeping, but I got to figure out a way to get it on social and make it count and make it matter. So then how do we combine all these teams within our department to create this product that ultimately, at the root of it, is something that's showing off stats and stories and record keeping, just maybe in a different way. And it can be simple too, right? You don't need to have a graphic designer on staff. Photos do the job just as well. Text does the job just as well. I think it always comes up around kind of championship seasons that the best text to send after you win a championship is just straightforward text, no graphics, no photos, right? So using the resources that you have available depending on where you're at, I think is a good way to meet and kind of marry those two and find a way to keep everyone happy.
Yeah, and I also think in terms of like skills and values that kind of haven't really changed in general are just kind of hard work and attention to detail. I mean, that goes for if, you're statting a basketball game and you're getting all the subs on, a full line change of people, or it comes with if you're making a golf graphic and making sure every single player's score is right and posting that on social media. That kind of piece hasn't really changed. It just shifted to be something more front public facing, I think, with social media. But also in that regard too, it's like as college sport communicators, like we're the faces of our department, whether that's on the website with, the stories we write or the statistics that we keep, and also with social media. So kind of keeping that in the back of your mind that you're the one at the end of the day who is representing your school, your institution, and your teams. And that's kind of how you have to carry yourself in the profession.
And I'll add to Brittany, it also comes down to what coaching staff you're working with too, and kind of what they see your role as, more so that some coaches are going to see you as that creative, where some coaches aren't, right? So we always kind of gauge our coaching staff's expectations at the beginning of the year. And that goes down to, do you want the SID statting the game, or do you want the SID doing creative, right? Where does your preference lie? Starting from the top down, a lot of those decisions will be made for you. And it's different. It's different here at Charleston with every team, what we have our primary contact doing each game based off the coach's preferences and what they prefer.
Brittany, I loved your point about, talking about attention to detail and some of those like intangible skills. Like, although, the profession has changed and we might not be as focused on the writing and the stats all the time as we are on some of the creative things. A lot of those intangible skills are still very much a part of what we do, and they're still incredibly important. So, you mentioned attention to detail. You mentioned I want to throw out there work ethic or multitasking, collaboration. Like, those are all intangible skills that like they might look a little bit different, because in the past it might have been focused more on the website and focused more on the articles and things of that nature. But now it might look a little bit different in terms of, hey, collaboration, like Lynn mentioned, how do I collaborate and, get my numbers and my stats? How do I present that in a way that looks nice, that's going to appeal more to our student athletes and some of our other constituents? Sometimes I feel like there's a little bit of a war. I know how much Lynn loves those Facebook groups about how there's this the traditional side versus the creative side, and sometimes they butt heads. But I think recognizing that both have their strengths, and both parties are talented in their own way and should be working together for the betterment of the department. I think that's how we can bridge the gap a little bit there. Our next transition, let's move into tradition versus innovation. Some of the skills that we talked about, such as collaboration and having a positive attitude, transition us to our next session where we talk about some innovation. Every SID is being asked to do more, try more, and adopt new tools, but that shouldn't mean abandoning what makes this profession special. So what does embracing innovation look like in a way that still honors the root of the profession? Then let's start with you.
Yeah, I think just being open and trying new things, right? It's not changing, it's not going away. And if you're not keeping up and you're not embracing it, it's going to leave you behind, and it's going to leave your department and your student athletes behind at the end of the day too. And what you're able to provide for them and make this the best 4 years for them, and telling their stories, and making sure you're doing your job as the face of your athletic department from the communication side. And it's okay to learn and to fail. I think you have to figure out what's going to be best used for your department and where your resources are and kind of what you can maintain. A lot of times too, I'm really careful to start new things here at Charleston if I'm weary that I'm not going to be able to continue it, right? I don't ever want to do a one-off. I don't ever want to say I'm going to do something and not be able to follow through. We just started a podcast here. We launched it about 2 weeks ago. We've got 12 episodes ready to go, right? So we're going to lock in, we're going to get it done. And that's an easy way that we were kind of able to marry that storytelling and that traditional side of getting our student athletes and our coaches out there with that new age media of podcast and meeting our fans where they're at.
And I think I'd kind of like to add that I know a reason for me of why I got into this profession is like I had such a great experience as a student athlete that I want to make that experience for our current student athletes the same or better as the one that I had. So kind of like you said, meeting them where they're at, finding out what things are important to them, because at the end of the day, athletics wouldn't be anything without the athletes that we're serving. So I think that that's kind of how I try and push in my department.
Yeah. In terms of, embracing innovation, but still honoring the roots of profession, I would say, a little bit of what we talked about earlier, where, storytelling has always been like a large root of the profession, whether that's, back in the day, if it was just writing and feature stories. But, now it's still storytelling if it's a graphic or a video or something along those lines. It just looks different than what it used to. So I think, the main principle is still the same, even though it might be getting done just a little bit differently. Our next question is talking about how do we prioritize the strategic area of our work and trying to figure out what's the best thing to add or put more emphasis on versus what do we need to cut back on. Brittany, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it all depends on like what is working and what is promoting your department the best. Like one thing that since I've been here, we've shifted from, which is kind of like shifting away from the traditional sense of what our responsibilities are as an SID is like game programs. So they always had digital game programs here for all sports except basketball. And they said that basketball game programs at the end of the game would just end up in the trash and no one would really even look at them. They'd be there for one day and they weren't really getting much out of them. So we do have a lot of 6-man members, which is our booster club, who are of the older generation. So they do like to have, a paper copy, something physical to bring to the game with them. So I kind of tried to find a happy medium. And that's where I came up with creating a media guide for men's and women's basketball. Actually, it's right here. For men's and women's basketball teams, it's double-sided. It has more of like an inside look to the team, like more in-depth bios about each player, facts that like you wouldn't find from our website, and making it somewhat exclusive, as well as being able to have the digital programs that get clicks. So I would say just, prioritizing what is getting your program seen. So if that's socials for a certain team, great, then you're pushing socials for that team. If everyone is reading the stories because it's, men's and women's golf, then that's how you have to focus for that sport. So I think it depends from sport to sport, but prioritizing what's getting your program seen.
Yeah, we made the decision, or I made the decision to stop doing game day programs for the same reason, Brittany. When I was walking on the concourse one day and the sustainability club, or whatever the proper term was, had it on there, what is recycling and what is not poster. So I was like, you know what, if this is what they're finding to use on their poster, it cost me a lot of money to end up on that poster to print those programs. So that was an easy switch we did. But we have a digital program now, right? And the QR codes are plastered everywhere on the arena and they're accessible. For anyone who wants to read it, they can just use it with that cell phone they have on them too, right? But it's It's right. It's your audience of who's reading what. I think one great thing that we have at our disposal is numbers and seeing what's doing well. We have the analytics on our websites. We have analytics on our social media posts. We can see who's opening up emails and responding and navigating it and using that to our advantage. And also using that to show your upper administration, here's what's working, here's why I'm making the decisions that I'm making. And it's going to look different for everybody and for every sport. I agree with Brittany on that softball and baseball, Twitter is huge, right? And that's where it's at. And it might not be for other sports. But if that's where it's at, that's where we're going to meet it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add to that, you mentioned a little bit about, meeting your audience and everything. I am big on looking into like what's taking a lot of time and is it actually worth our time? So, we mentioned programs as an example. We don't even do the digital ones anymore, just because I'm looking at who's actually the amount of people actually doing them. And I don't think we ever passed 10 people that was scanning a QR code to read the digital program. And the effort we were putting into those, it just wasn't worth it. To continue doing. And then, same with some of our website things. Stories, I enjoy writing stories. I really did, especially when I first started. But when they're only getting maybe 100, 200, 300 views as compared to like, hey, can we do extra social posts that are going to get like thousands of more views? And I think when you compare those things, I think it's a no-brainer. Kind of bouncing off that question, how do you advocate for what you're prioritizing with your administration and talking about them like, hey, making recommendations as far as what should get done versus what could get done?
Yeah, I think it goes back to using the tools that are at our disposal to kind of tell our story, right, of why we're doing what we're doing to our administration, but also having honest conversations and working for someone and positioning yourself in the room as the expert in the field, I think is really big. And selling yourself, right? Like having confidence in yourself, knowing what you're doing with your department, whichever way it is, right? If you're a one-man shop, maybe you're not going social and maybe you've got an older fan base. Maybe you're going more the website, traditional print, and you are still printing game programs because they're getting taken off the shelf, right? You have to come prepared with reasoning. And sometimes that might take a few yes, no's, sometimes trying something, see what happens, see if it fails. Sometimes you might surprise yourself too. On what actually is needed. But I think you have to be confident in yourself in the decision you're making. And you also have to see, like I said earlier, if you can sustain it and if you can follow through on whatever decisions you're making to prioritize certain tasks.
Yeah. And in terms of administration, it also comes to relationship building with, whoever is above you. Like I have a really good relationship with everyone in my department, as well as, a lot of our admin, our athletic director, like he has full faith into just letting the communications department decide on what's best for comms on a lot of things, because, he's kind of like, I don't know what you guys do. You know what you have to do and you get it done. So it's kind of building that relationship, building that trust with your admin that they don't even have a reason to question why you make any particular decision.
Yes, I definitely agree. The relationship element goes a long way. I would, present it to them. I mean, keep in mind, I think sometimes we forget that we're the expert in our field, right? And hopefully your administration agrees and acknowledges that. But, having that courage to kind of make your case, bring your data to back you up. The more numbers you have, the better. And, if you are going to shift how you do things, say, for example, if you're going to shift a little bit more from, hey, I don't want to focus on as much of the traditional piece. I want to move to more of like the creative piece or social piece. There's still elements of that traditional piece that always have to be done. No matter how much emphasis we put on social, we always need to have things updated and, there's just certain things that are always going to have to be done. So explaining though that even though you're going to shift your emphasis a little bit, how are those basics still going to be taken care of and met properly? And as we talk about innovation, it's impossible to talk about how staffing can play a role in that. So let's talk about a little bit about the operations side about being an SID. How has staffing structures changed a little bit of your day-to-day reality? Brittany, you want to start with that one?
Sure. So I've kind of seen this in two different ways. Like I've been in a 2-person department, and now I'm in a 4-person department. So my role has been very different, but also certain parts of it are the same from, the two. So when I was in a 2-person department, it was 2 of us kind of tag teaming everything. Like we would be at almost every basketball game together, but we were able to, once I was there for a year or so, we were able to split up sports. So that way we're not, having a work-life balance and not just driving ourselves crazy. But there, my role had to like shift depending on who we had available. And, if we didn't have our student worker who does stats, then I'm the one doing stats. Whereas kind of in a 4-person department here, I'm able to have a little bit more of a creative focus, even when it is my sports. So it kind of depends on what you have and, the people that you're dealing with, as well as like your student staff that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and it depends on kind of what you need to fill in your office. We hired 2 positions this summer. One was a full-time, one was a 1-year post-grad intern, and I needed different things for those positions. And it was really important to me for that full-time position. They knew how to do stats, right? They didn't have to be an expert, but I needed an extra person on our staff to fill that because that's the void we were missing. And I needed this post-grad intern to kind of bring some of that youthful social, coming up with ideas, energy into the office too, right? It went beyond just the tactical skills, but in how you're piecing an office together and how they're going to treat people as humans and acknowledge that we all have different strengths, right? My associate director is phenomenal at graphics, right? He's helping everybody out with it. He's also phenomenal at the stats, right? And that's what brought them here was that, all right, they're not top level at anything, but they're really, really good at a lot of things, right? And that's what the Charleston office needed with the resources that we had at our availability. So it was just really, all right, I know where we're at. I know what I'm going to need to kind of make this function. If we had 4 primary social people in here, it just wasn't going to work, right? Right. We're in a situation right now where I think all of us at one point are going to stat a softball game, right? Because we all know how to do it and we're all helping each other out to fulfill it. But we're also all going to run social for another account at some point too, right? We're probably 80% our sport is our sport, but everyone touches everything, right? And that mentality of having people that, all right, you're the stat guy, but I need you to acknowledge that what they're doing is also really important, because if you're not going to acknowledge that everything is important, that's where it's going to fall apart, right? And right, some SIDs coming up now, maybe they don't know how to stat, right? But like teach them, right? Like figure out how to make your life easier by teaching them, as opposed to yelling and complaining that, oh, well, they don't know how to do this. Why are they here? Well, the same could go vice versa, right? The field's changing. If you don't know how to do social, right? Same thing, right? It's just at the end of the day, it's where we're at.
Yes, I've definitely gone through a little bit of structure change here recently. And I think it's important when you do have an opening to, visualize your department and think about like, what do you want? What do you have and what do you want? So for example, my opening now, I had myself, I tend to focus a little bit more on our graphics, but then a lot of the traditional stuff, as well as my admin work that comes with being on senior staff. So I needed, my current assistant now is fantastic on the traditional side. He's grown a ton, and I'm glad I can hand a lot of that stuff to him to free me up for some of the admin work that I need to do. But with my new role, I really wanted to have more of that creative emphasis. So that's the direction that we're going to go in. And the reason I was even able to do that is because I put in the effort. Like Lynn said, I taught some students how to stat. I taught just more students how to fill other roles on the scores table. That way it's less burden on me and my team, and it frees us up to where, hey, we can have someone who can have a little bit more creative focus on the staff, because me and Owen have the scores table covered with people that we've trained, or if we can jump in and fill them ourselves if needed. Bouncing off that a little bit, would love to hear you both talk about how you train your student workers or young staff to be prepared for this modern SID role. Then you want to start with that?
Yeah, I like to plan very far in advance, right? So by the time October rolls around, hopefully I've got the basketball schedule by then, just for example. I already know kind of where my staffing is going to be. And I use that example because a lot of times that does involve who's going to be my stat inputter, who's going to be my caller. And if I need to start training someone, I need to do it right now. And I need to get them in the gym at practice. I need to have them doing practice games in the office. But being prepared a lot can help decide where your training with your students need to go. And also utilizing what they're interested in in the office as well, right? A lot of our interns here at Charleston, they only want to do social and they only want to do graphics. That's fine. They can do it. I'll handle the traditional side, right? I'm going to use whatever help they're willing to give me to kind of make the office run. But if I can find a little interest in one of them that is interested in something that the other ones aren't in, then their opportunities are only going to rise if they're the only one that's kind of taking part in those things, and that I can train and be open to it. And a lot of times too, like, I'll pull a kid for volleyball example and just say, hey, I just need you to yell out the numbers, right? And like I can figure out the rest. But having a little bit of faith in them too can be helpful.
Yeah, and I'm big on mentorship, especially when it comes to students who are, I mean, all students, but students who are interested in pursuing a career in sports. I know that I'm constantly on LinkedIn. I'll send them jobs like anytime I see them, because a lot of them are like graduating seniors. But in terms of, how they're prepared today, it's just taking the time. Like, I know we're all really busy as SIDs, like there's no doubt about it, but taking the time to make sure that you're preparing them and setting them up for success. Because, for example, we had a really dedicated play-by-play color analyst student worker who, he's done basketball, he's done baseball, softball, he's done soccer, but he's never touched lacrosse. And this year we had both our play-by-play people for men's and women's lacrosse have conflicts. So we said, Carl, you're going to be the one doing play-by-play for men's and women's lacrosse. And I sat in here, we watched film, I told him every single rule, and he's sitting there with his notebook jotting down pages and pages and pages of notes. So playing to their interests and like really making sure they're prepared is what's going to help your department thrive. If I had just said, go watch a practice and hope you figure it out, that wouldn't be the most use of anyone's time, because he's not going to be prepared. He's not going to know what's going on. And then it's going to, like I said before, we're the face of our department. It's going to fall back on us. So I think investing into your student workers and making sure that they know exactly what's going on is really important.
Yep. To add to that, talking about specifically how I train, my student workers right now at least kind of fall into two areas. I have one side that's more the creatives; they'll do the videos and pictures, and then my other side that does more statting or just other table responsibilities. And I just try to be as hands-on during the training process. For my statters, typically I'll pick a day, a week or two before the season starts, and we'll go in our conference room and we'll go through the rule book, we'll go through practice games, get their hands on the software. That way, the first time they're looking at it, it's not like an actual day of game. And we'll go through different scenarios. We got lacrosse training later this week. So that's what I try to do to get out ahead of things. And if I can, I even have them come and I'll let them clock in and, hey, you're going to stat this game, but for your first time, they're going to be like the secondary stats. So they're not going to be the official stats for the first game they work, but they'll, be able to get some experience without it, mattering if they're able to get it on the first try or not. So that's how I kind of like to do things with my creatives. Again, that's not necessarily as much of my area of expertise, but I recognize that. But I'm able to at least tell them how to work the camera and the kind of the shots I want to try to set them up for success. So that's how I train those. And then I kind of pioneered the whole student workers when I got here. We didn't have any when I started. So now that they're starting to become more juniors and seniors, that's when I'm trying to throw a little bit more at them, especially those that have expressed like, hey, I would do want to like stay in sports. Then if you have people like that, then, I would give them as many different roles as you can. That way, they can just be more versatile whenever they try to enter the workplace and be set up for success there. Next question involves those student creatives, and it's one of our user submitted questions. What are the best practices for corralling creatives to work collaboratively and productively when having to rely on students or volunteers in that role? Brittany, do you want to lead that one?
Sure. So we kind of have a team of like student creatives here, which is really awesome that I have, 3 or 4 student photographers, 2 or 3 student videographers, and a couple of student graphic designers. So we're really lucky to have people who are passionate about those areas of the creative side. But I have all of them in a group chat with my photography Instagram, and we're all like constantly sending things that we see that, you know, we think it's a cool idea, or if it's a cool graphic, or if it's a song that they saw in a video. And just kind of like, I think especially when it comes to creative, sometimes people can be a little bit like protective of their work and gatekeep a little bit. But I think especially as they're learning and building their portfolio, it's really important to, you know, kind of be lifting each other up in that scenario. And, you know, if I see a student worker that posts some, like makes something that's amazing, like I'll make sure that I share it on everything, even if it's my own, like just kind of empowering them to like make their own decisions with guidance. And I always tell them, like, I'm here for any questions you have. If you have a question about camera settings at a basketball game, just come ask me. If you have questions like, you know, the lighting's changing from day to night at a lacrosse 5 p.m. game, like, come ask me. I'm always open and willing to help. And honestly, like, we had a student worker who came in the other day and he's like, I'm interested in taking photos and videos. And I thought nothing of it. I was like, sure, you can come shadow me at a basketball game that's not too busy. And he came. We had no one else that day because we were also hosting swim conference championships. So happened to have an extra camera. I'm like, here you go. I put the settings to what it needs to be. I'm like, just try it. See what you do. And he actually tracked the ball so well at a basketball game. I was so impressed. It was his first time holding a camera. So just even giving them the opportunities to be able to try new things is really important.
Yeah, I think a lot of times students don't get enough credit for kind of wanting to take initiative. I always tell students when they first reach out of wanting to work in our office that it takes a lot to reach out in college and kind of make that connection and figure out where to take a step and where to start kind of thinking about post-grad life. But yeah, to Brittany's credit, we had a student as well. He was a freshman. He came in, he kind of just wanted his place. And we gave him a place and picked up his camera. And if I were to show you a photo of his from a soccer game in the fall to the softball game he shot for us last week, like, you wouldn't even know the difference, right? And that's not because of my office and our department, right? It's because we gave him an opportunity and he kind of took it and ran and learned. And using kids that are passionate and driven and hardworking, like we were talking about earlier, to make your department better.
Yes, I think it's really important. At least it's worked really well for our department with our student creatives to kind of set out your strategy of like what you want them to accomplish. That way, they kind of know what they need to do. So, for example, our creative students, when they show up and they're doing video, they know that if we win, that I need to have a video done before the next. It's got to be ready to post before their next game, and that's kind of like the standard that like I've set. And the ones that have been with me, they know. I don't even have to tell them anymore. Like, I don't have to say, hey, can you give me a highlight video? They just know, like, if they're at a game and they're videoing and we win, make a highlight video for social. Like, they just kind of know. So I think the more you set the expectation and the strategy, I think that helps with the collaboration aspect. I also allow them, you know, some of my older ones that have been with me now, they're starting to come to me with ideas. Like, we had one that's like, I've never done a mic'd up before. Can I go do a mic'd up at a practice? I'm like, sure, go crazy. You got it. So that's been really exciting to see. And I think it just kind of builds their passion for what they're doing. So that's been really cool. Last question on this topic. Just any other general advice on how to divide sports, roles, responsibilities in smaller departments?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice on this would just be strategic. If you have an office that can do primary sports, being strategic with who's with what, and what kind of their busy time of year is going to be, what's going to make most sense during crossover for them. Using summer as a big time to figure out what we're going to do and be prepared so that when fall, winter, spring comes, it's just you're rolling, right? You've done all the prep work in the summer. You have templates built, you have scheduling kind of mapped and what's going to be a tricky weekend and what you maybe know you're going to have to sacrifice on at some points. But I think being strategic and really taking a critical look at who's doing what can help pay dividends in the long run.
Yeah, and I think, like we've kind of mentioned a bunch of times now, is just playing to each other's strengths. Like, when, you know, things are tight, and like I was telling Becky earlier, last weekend we had a bunch of home events. Swim was hosting conference championship, and we had on Saturday probably 14 events going on, something close to that. And there's 4 of us. Like, we just had to divide and conquer when it came to, you know, post game covering, like recaps and stuff like that. Like, men's tennis is not my sport, but Clay was still statting a baseball game when tennis wrapped up. So I, you know, wrote the story, got it on the back end, pushed it out for him. So just, it's all about relationships too, like within your own department, of like helping each other out. Cause like we've kind of been saying, it's all about promoting the school and getting that done however is best for your department.
Yeah, I think we've covered that. I don't think I need to add any more to that, but definitely highly recommend being strategic about it. Before we move on to our next topic, we did have one question in the chat talking about how you come up with deadlines for your creatives and your creative projects. I'll pop on it real quick, and then you all can add, since I think it kind of lends towards what I just said about my student creatives. But for me, you know, I just thought about what makes sense. Like, I used my highlight video example. Like, you know, I think that's a fair deadline for them still being students, to where a lot of times it still gives them a couple days. But at the end of the day, you know, no one wants to see a highlight video from a game like a week or 2 weeks ago. So I think it's important to be timely. Plus, I do want to push them a little bit to like get them used to like the demands of the profession of like, hey, you know, a lot of times you do only have like a day or 2 to kind of turn these things around. So that's why I kind of came up with my whole before the next game type structure. Do you all have anything to add when it comes to deadlines or how you strategize those?
Yeah, for us, it's kind of shifted. So like when I was at Eckerd and we were a 2-person staff, and you know we only had 1 or 2 student videographers who were shooting 5 or 6 games in a week. It depended on the week and you know the results and things like that. But we would kind of be strategic about, hey, we know we're going to win this game. We know we're going to win that game. Let's make sure we have a videographer at those games. Or if it's a senior day, or if it was, you know, we had teal outs, like our, you know, where student athletes were supposed to come support, kind of focusing on those games and trying to be timely, like you said, getting a 1-day turnaround, posting it the next day. It's been different here. We are able to kind of staff more games. And so when we win, we're kind of, our videographers know like we're posting this the next day. So like we need it by noon the next day, or even that night we're posting win photos that night. So I need you to bring your computer with you to the game, get me 20 to 30 solid photos. So that way we're good to go at the end of the game.
Yeah, our big kind of phrase here is if you miss the moment, it's going to be gone. So sometimes, right, like it's hard to put a deadline in this industry just because of everything that's moving and you don't know what's going to happen and things could change at the drop of a hat. But it's all right, we're going to be ready for when it does. And if we're not, we're going to learn from it and see how we can get better the next time. But using what's at your disposal, whether it's your iPhone, whether it's the broadcast feed, whether it is a creative, but knowing that if it's not there, like, you missed it. So it's always kind of pivoting, and we'll have after each game, we all kind of gather real quick, whether it's in person or on our phones, and say, all right, here's what I need from you. Here's what I need from you. Did you get this? Did you get that? With probably like 6 minutes left in every men's basketball game, I text all our students and I'm like, all right, whoever can get me a good celebration picture, like you'll be on the final graphic, right? And that means something to them too, because those graphics get seen by a lot of people. So they want to be the one to get their photo on it too. So kind of using, all right, like, here's your shot. Like, if you get it to me, I'm going to use it.
One more quick question on the same topic from the chat. I think this is a pretty good one. Coming in as an SID in the middle of the year, where there is already an established role division, what do you recommend when trying to become the missing puzzle piece when others are already rolling with the way things currently go?
Yeah, I mean, my advice probably isn't what you want to hear, but like sit back, listen, observe how things are, take data, take notes, right? Like see what's working, see what's not working, and then come summertime, because this time is crazy now for everyone, and sit back and go, okay, I'm here. Here's what I think I'm good at. Here's how I think I could help fill this role. Let's talk about it, which probably doesn't help you much right now. And kind of coming in mid-year is always tough when things are rolling and we're in the home stretch here. but kind of sitting back and figuring out and right, showing everyone that you're a team player right now and you can be that piece, whatever it is right now in the moment.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just being adaptable, which is kind of, I feel like, the motto of our profession. Kind of, especially coming in mid-year when things are seemingly set, is just kind of being that Swiss Army knife that could fill in any gaps. I think that would probably be huge and most beneficial. And then, like Lynn said, kind of reevaluating in the summer of where can I fit in defining your role that way.
Yeah, and I would use the spring to kind of build the relationships where you're at, especially with your boss or supervisor, and then bring ideas in the summer. Like have a plan, because I think if you just kind of leave it open ended, then then you're kind of just putting more on the supervisor. But if you have like a plan or idea, like let them know like where you think you want to go and how you think it would work with the greater department, I think it would be really helpful. Now we can move to our next topic, talking about tools, workflow, and efficiency. What tools or processes have made a big difference for you all in your efficiency? And how does AI kind of fit in that place? I know we'll talk about that here. Then do you want to start with that?
Yeah, and here at Charleston, we are traditional in the sense we don't use any of the AI platforms that are out there. The extent of what we do is kind of in Adobe, right? Like that does make our lives easier if we're trying to Photoshop out a hand or out a person from behind a ball rack if we have a generic story, right, that we need to use. Those tools have saved a lot of time, whether it's Photoshop, InDesign for filling out bleed space, right, for example. But we don't use any of those tools that are out there. I think the way that we're structured and we're built, we haven't seen a need for them quite yet, but that's also because we support each other and we work with each other to make sure that we're utilizing our time the best. That's not to say it's not coming in the future, but those tools from creative side, because there's 4 of us here and we have to do it all. So that's kind of, if it's already built into something we're already using, that's helped us a lot. Photoshop's probably the biggest example with their generative fill. But yeah, Brittany can probably give some more because just of our schools and our structures and our universities are a little different.
Right. Yeah. This year was our first year with FanWord, and it actually has been a huge time saver. Now, that's not to say AI is perfect and it's the solution for everything. Like, I think my biggest thing that I preach about using FanWord or other AI tools is that that's exactly what they are. They're tools, not replacements. So using it as a way to save time post game, I'm able to shift my focus in other ways. So like, for example, at the end of a basketball game, I am taking more of the time to go through my photos that I've got. I'm getting a post ready and out to go. And then, I'm popping my XML into FanWord, reading it over, making sure it's all correct, names are spelled right, times for things are correct, because it's, like I said, it's not perfect. Every now and then there's one little thing that needs to be tweaked. And then also just kind of going back in and making it my own a little bit, kind of giving it my voice too, is how I've found it to be most useful. I think the biggest thing, like I said, is it's a tool, not a replacement. So it takes still some effort to go through it and, proofreading, but it definitely has saved me a lot of time and given me the ability to push more content out more quickly post game.
I promise this webinar isn't sponsored by FanWord, but we are a big advocate for that here. It's been a huge help for me, and we talk a little bit about that ROI in terms of like time, the amount of time that it's saved me, especially for days when we have multiple things going on at the same time. It's been a huge resource. Like Brittany said, it's not perfect on the first try, but to steal their phrase, it does get you 85% of the way there in 2 seconds. So that's been huge in terms of covering some of the traditional side of things. So that's been a big tool for us. And then there's plenty of other tools that help with social in terms of scheduling. We use all the free ones. We don't pay for any of the paid social tools. But even just something as simple as like the Meta Business Suite that I'm sure we all use, but it's helps you post all your stories and post all your Facebook posts and Instagram posts and tracks all the analytics. All of those things are incredibly helpful. I know we talked about AI a little bit there, and I know then you said you all are traditional, but at least for Brittany, do you have any other additional thoughts on AI as a resource for either helping with traditional communications tasks or for helping for some of even the newer tasks such as ideation or editing photos or anything like that?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of like the traditional tasks, it's mainly with helping with the recaps and things like that. But in terms of like more of the creative tasks, I don't use it too much, but like Lynn was saying, like the generative fill for Photoshop has been a lifesaver. And what would normally take me, an hour to fix and retouch would take me 10 seconds. So that's been really helpful and time saving in that way. As well as honestly, like even coming up with like captions for social posts, like it helps because you're able to, I see like one of the things in the chat is saying the more you use it, the better it learns, especially with recaps. That's also been true with like coming up with captions. I always say, make it that for a college student athlete, and I'll say make it less cringy because sometimes it'll come up with some pretty cringy stuff. So the more you use it, the more it learns, and it'll help you kind of resonate with a younger audience if you're not in that role.
I'll add too, I think in the newer space and how to use this. I like to pride myself on being creative and coming up with good captions, but like after 28 basketball games, like I'm running a little dry. So I'll admit, like I've plugged in, hey, here's my mascot, here's their mascot, we're playing on this night and it's this league, and can you come up with a funny caption that's not so serious because we can't totally bash them on ChatGPT? And I've done it twice, so I'll admit to that. But it is a helpful tool that can kind of, if you're feeling stuck in this time of year, especially, can kind of get the juices going, right? You don't have to take it directly, but you're like, I would have thought of that eventually. Just give me a couple minutes, it would have come to my head anyways.
Yes, it's definitely really useful for that. I joke around with my students and say I'm old now, at least in this profession, when it comes to social and things of that nature. So I don't know what's cool anymore. So that's why I do the same thing with the captions. It's also been super useful in terms of some of those. We try to do like some videos with some student athletes to help promote some upcoming games, or if we have a promotion going on. And it's super useful to like help give it like some script outlines for like a video. I really have enjoyed that. And like, it's not perfect, but like, it kind of just like takes some loose ideas that I have in my head and helps put them in like an outline form. And I can take it from there and tweak it how I want. But that's been a really good way to use that I've really enjoyed. We're running a little bit short on time here, so I'm going to skip to our final topic, just talking about the future of the profession. How do you all see the balance between creative and traditional responsibilities evolving even further?
I think it's just going to become one task. Like, I don't think there's going to be a separation at some point. It's just going to be, how do we mesh these two together to create what is needed to be done? I think the gap is going to shrink a little bit, but that comes with people accepting that, right? And the gap might shrink, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be a spectrum of what you're strong at. Strengths are never going to go away. Weaknesses are never going to go away. How can you contribute best? I think that gap will shrink as well, and acknowledging those things.
I think too, you'll see like a lot more like emergence of people in more specialized roles and athletic departments investing into more specialized roles. I feel like we've seen a lot more, especially at like the Division I level, like strictly creative roles coming up recently. And I feel like that kind of is going to grow in the future for sure.
Yeah, we've even seen that in small schools. I mean, I talked about my own experience. Like, we're going to have a full-time person who is like going to be, I mean, slightly a little bit more little sports info, but they're going to be, 80% creative, 75-80% creative. So that's something that I don't know that would have been possible when I first started here. So it's been kind of cool to see that. But I think for smaller schools, especially where that's not the case, that push is probably just gonna continue, I think. What is some just closing advice that you have for someone entering the profession today?
I'll always say just say yes to everything, especially if you're an undergrad student and you're in an office or you're a GA. And it might not be your sport or it might not be what your supervisor is asking you to do. Stats are never going to go away. Like you're always going to need to know how to do stats. And in the same vein as what we were just talking about, that can't be ignored. And the more sports you have at your disposal when you're entering the field, that could be the separator between hiring someone and hiring someone else, is having that one skill that makes your office and your department and your boss's life easier. But trying new things, right? Same could go for graphics, right? But really, really saying you have experience in everything. And if someone offers you the opportunity to take it, and if it's not being offered, ask for it.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest things, especially that I kind of preach to my student workers, is having a growth mindset. It's something that I try to keep with me, even being in a full-time role, is I'm always learning from them, trying to better myself by, attending webinars like this, going to convention, doing things that are always going to make me improve, as well as for them just kind of getting involved in any way possible. Even if it's not at your, school's athletic department. Like when I was working for the Pan American Lacrosse Association, I kind of called on any and all student workers that were in the conference, like local area, that I could potentially, scrounge up, because we were a completely volunteer-led organization. And I was able to get, 5-10 of them to staff a 5-day like world lacrosse event. So like kind of Lynn said, just say yes to things.
Well, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you so much to Lynn and Brittany for joining us and sharing your experience and advice to make sure our members are finding the balance between the traditional SID responsibilities and embracing innovation. I think we talked about a lot of great stuff. We talked about structuring your staff. We talked about kind of how the profession has changed. We talked about some tools to help people in their day-to-day. So I think we covered a good bit here. Thanks to everyone who joined and submitted questions. Please take a moment to complete our brief post-webinar survey to help us improve for future programming. We encourage you all to visit collegesportscommunicators.com for updates on future webinars, membership news, and available resources as you continue on your journey. Thanks again for joining us today.